Now, another advanced visualization technique that's used in ArchViz would be the utilization of passes, right? And these are often known as render passes. The primary concept is simply extracting different layers of the same information. So think of it as different ways of viewing the same image, and each of those layers has a different set of information that you can extract to let your image look different. So let's look at an example of passes. And the concept of passes really exists in two categories. You have, I would say, manual passes, which is what we're going to look on first, which is creating your own pass. And then you have automatic passes, which are generated for you, right? So let's take a look at creating our own pass, right? And this is an example of the model in SketchUp. And what we're going to do in SketchUp, the concept is we want to save out different views of the same building, but each of those views are going to be exactly the same. However, how it is displayed is going to be different. Now, the trick with you doing passes is that the camera views needs to line up 100%. This is super important, right? So think of it as layering different layers together. Each of those layers, the view has to be 100% the exact same view. The angle has to be the same. So the first thing I need to do is to set up a particular angle that I want to use. And I'm going to do this in SketchUp. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the camera tool, and I am going to find a particular camera view that I like. So I'm going to create here to create a camera. I'm going to create a camera there. And if you notice, the camera has things such as the name of the camera, the format, the height, the tilt, the roll, focal axis, and all of that information is down here. Now, this information is going to be very useful because what we're going to do is we're going to angle our camera to get the perfect view that we want. So in this case, I want to orbit this view slightly to the side, maybe like that. That looks good enough. Then while I'm in this camera, I'm going to now lock my camera view. And when I lock my camera view, it essentially saves this view. So just in case I move it by accident, I can click this little I button here, choose OK, and it will angle back to the view that I had before. Now this is very useful because remember, the concept of using passes is that we want to extract multiple images of the same model, but each of those images will have a different set of information. Now I still want to kind of modify this view a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock it, and then I'm going to go to edit camera, and I'm going to normalize these settings. So this view is about 22 feet 2 7/8 inches. So I'm probably just going to average that to 28 feet. The tilt, I'm going to make that 0 because the tilt will affect the how straight these verticals are, and I want them to be 100% straight. So I'm gonna put that to 0, and the roll is also 0. The focal length, I will leave it at 67 because this looks okay. And the aspect ratio, now this is important. I'm going to put this to about 1.78, and that's about the aspect ratio for a 16:9 image. And the width, I'm just going to kind of make up a number here, so let's make that 40 millimeters and choose OK. Alright, we're going to tweak it just a little bit more, so perhaps let's go to edit camera. Perhaps what we can do now is we are going to adjust the focal length a bit more. So let's put the focal length to maybe 30. Choose OK. There we go. And we're going to make it a little closer. So if you have an idea of how camera lenses work, the larger this number is, pretty much is the more zoom in or more telephoto your view will be. So let us try 40. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now the reason I type these numbers in is that I want to keep an eye on what these numbers are, in case maybe I have another scene, or at a later date I want to set up another view exactly like this view. But in order for the passes concept to work, we need to ensure that our views are 100% matched. And we're going to see how important that is as we go along. So now I'm going to lock this camera, and I am going to also save this file. Okay, so now that this is saved, now I'm going to work on creating my passes. Now, I'm going to save this view. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Export as 2D graphic. And I'm going to save this in my folder. I'm going to save it in a folder called SketchUp, called Manual Passes. And let's call this pass shaded. And if I go into my options here, I'm going to ensure to check that it is a transparent background. And I'm going to choose export. And I'm exporting that as a PNG. That way I will have the transparency in these white areas. Now I'm going to do these a couple times for different views. So for example, I'm going to go to my default tray, and I'm going to change the view. So this time I'm going to try we don't want any background, so we could just go with the hidden line view. This is another good pass. Now this time when I export, I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try this as a PDF file. And I'm going to call this hidden line pass. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and save a PDF and a PNG for both the shaded and the hidden line views. Alright, so this is what it looks like. I have this PNG, and if I open that PNG, this is what it looks like. And I have that PNG of the hidden line, and I also have a PNG of the shaded view. Now, additionally, I also created a PDF of the hidden line and a PDF of the shaded view. In addition, I also created an EPS version, and the EPS version is a vector file format of both the hidden line and the shaded view. So these are what you refer to as passes, right? And the reason why we call them a pass is, it's like saying that I have saved out this view and it's the exact same view of the same model, but it's showing me different information. In this case, it's showing me lines, and in this case, it's showing me hidden lines. Now, the idea behind render passes is that you would open, for example, let's open the shaded and the hidden line pass, and let's take that into Photoshop. Now, when we open Photoshop, this is what we see. We have one layer that is the hidden line, and if we turn that layer off, we will see the other layer below it, right? And this is the concept behind how passes work. If I reduce the opacity of one layer, you can see slightly as the other layer shows up right behind it. Now you realize in order for this to work, these two layers will have to be aligned 100% so that the line work can be nice and sharp, right? Now there's a lot that you can use passes to achieve, and this is just an example of creating your own manual passes. And for example, in some cases, for example, if I wanted to change the to maybe fill in this section with a particular color, maybe if I use my magic wand, and I'm going to have to rasterize these layers in order for this to work. Now before I rasterize these layers, what I'm actually going to do is to create a folder, and I'm going to call this folder backup of original passes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate these, and I'm going to save them in this backup folder here and turn it off, right? The reason I do that is because I plan to rasterize these layers. And there we go. And when you rasterize a layer, you're now able to edit, and just in case I want to get back my original layers, I have a backup of them right there. Now if for example I wanted to maybe use my magic wand to select a particular part of this image, maybe like here, and in some cases like this is perfectly fine, but it becomes a little bit more tricky if I want to select maybe just the back of this couch. Notice all this selection kind of bleeds into other areas, and this, one reason for this is because of the pixels are a bit blurry, but the additional reason is that the pixels have more color information here. Now I could use my hidden line layer to do most of the selection that is tricky. For example, if I wanted to select just this area in here, notice that my selections are much more clean because this hidden line layer gives me better contrast. So the whole concept behind passes is that I use a layer to facilitate modifying the image. No, so I may, for example, select these areas in here, and then maybe that's all I need from this layer, so I just turn it off, and when I turn on this layer, I can add an effect here. Now additionally, you can use passes to help to manipulate another layer that would have been perhaps more difficult to edit. Let's use another example. Let's say that I had this layer here, and maybe what I wanted to do is to recolor all of this section up here. Now I could use my magic wand to kind of select this layer here, and then select this layer here. Then I would kind of have this gap here to select, you know, and then I would have to try and match those layers. But instead, what I could do is, you know, I could switch to my other layer here, and then I can manipulate this layer. Maybe what I'll do is I will just use maybe this tool, the lasso tool, to select that area there, and then I will just delete it. Now the good thing about that is that because this is white, because this layer is white, it's much easier, and I could just instead of deleting it, I could really just fill it with white as well to show this example. And there we go. Let's deselect that, and now I've completely edited this, and now it's much easier for me to maybe select this entire side here in order to give it a new color for this layer, which totally ignores this line here. Alright, so this is just a little example of how I could use another pass to help me achieve something based on the look and feel that I want to achieve, right? And this is the kind of manipulations that you do with render passes. The concept is that you use a pass, you generate a pass that facilitates the ability to make a certain change. In this case, an outline pass makes it easier for me to manipulate certain elements because of the nature of this layer. Some of the layer is basically just black and white. Now let's make a simple color change, but before I do the color change, I'm going to also do some more editing on this pass. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use my brush tool here and let my brush be 100% sharp, and let it be very small. I'm using the left and right brackets to make this small, and I'm just going to kind of wipe out this line here like that, and I'm going to just remove this line here. And remove this line here. Alright, now I could do that on this pass, but I may not be able to match back the exact color that I had here. So instead, if I try to erase this, I could try and get the right color, but it may not exactly match what I have in that area. So making those manipulations is much easier on this layer. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this area up here. Then I'm going to create a new layer, of which I'm going to fill it with a particular color. So I'm going to choose let's pick a nice kind of a maybe orange color here. I'm going to fill up there with that color. And notice that that color is on layer 1, so maybe I can call this orange. Alright, now I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to right click and deselect. Now the good thing is that even when I turn this layer on, this still remains orange because it's on a totally different layer. Now along with this, I can also use the layer overlays to get different effects. So notice that I am able to, let's try the multiply. Now in this case, let's use the overlay. I am able to show a particular graphic here, but yet still I'm still seeing the line work from a different layer before. Now that layer is still by itself here, so if I put this to normal and I turn off all the other layers, you can see that this layer is here by itself. And I can do other interesting things with this layer as well, and we're going to come back to using overlays, to using layer mask to make further edits. Now the other thing that we want to do is we're going to look on another pass that we created. In this case, we created two passes. We created one pass that is a hidden line, and we created another one that was shaded. Now we also extracted some PDF passes as well. And we can see them here. Now the great thing about the PDF and the EPS pass is that we are able to open this in Illustrator, and I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to go open with Illustrator, and essentially what this is a vector pass, because now I'm able to actually select the individual line work, and you can see that there are some minor errors with how the line work came out. Let's look at the hidden line version as well. So I'm going to open that with Illustrator. There we go. Now because this is in Illustrator, you can see that the line work is actually very exquisite, right? Nice clean lines, because the PDF export from SketchUp allowed the line work to come out pretty neat. Now it's not 100% perfect, because we noticed that there are some lines missing, some line work missing from here, and in this one you can see that there are some areas that are not filled appropriately. But nevertheless, these two passes, which you could call them a vector pass, gives us the ability to now manipulate these vectors, and we can essentially combine all of them together. Now, with the ability of a vector pass, it now gives me the ability to make changes that that can be done with vector tools. And a major advantage with vector tools is, for example, being able to edit line work. Now, on the topic of line work, you might already have noticed that if I switch back to Photoshop here and you take a look, the line work here, because it has to be represented by pixels, is quite not so good. To be frank, it's quite horrible. And you know, horrible is relative, because from a certain distance it looks fine, but of course that will affect the size that you may choose to print or export or publish this image at. If it's going to be on a phone screen, then it will be fine. But if you plan to maybe show it on a large screen or print it on a large sheet of paper, these are going to show up as jagged edges. Now, on the flip side, the vector pass is nice and clean, and we can use vector tools to make manipulations which we could not do if we were to use pixel tools. So for example, one advantage of using vector tools is we can, for example, select all of these lines up here. So if I should use my lasso selection tool and select pretty much all of these lines up here, I could make these lines, if I head over to my stroke, I could make these lines dash lines, for example, and I could make them even red dash lines with a particular thickness. There we go. By the click of a button, because these are really just line work. That's all they really are. And because they are line work, I can do other manipulations with them as well. For example, if I wanted to maybe carve a section out of this wall here, I mean, I could just use the eraser tool, and let's increase the size of that. And using the eraser tool, it immediately split these lines here, and using my direct selection tool, these are actual line work that I can further manipulate. So I could maybe manipulate this edge here to do that, and then carry this edge here to do that. So it's a lot easier to manipulate lines if we are using this vector tool. Now the great news is that we can combine all of these passes into one software. So for example, I can now save this, and I will save this particular render pass as SketchUp render pass hidden line, and I will choose save there. And I'm actually going to save this as a Illustrator file instead of a PDF. So let's do that again. I'm going to save that as an Illustrator file. It's going to ask me what year of Illustrator do I want to save. I'm just going to choose. I will leave everything as default and save there. Now back in Photoshop, I can actually go to File and go to Place Linked. And I can go to that folder and look for that pass, that render pass, and actually just place that onto my board. And the great thing is that it should be the same size. There we go. Now we don't want to change the ratio of it. So we're just sizing, we're not skewing it, we're just scaling it up or down to match. There we go. All right. And then what we have done was just included the vector pass directly in Photoshop. Now, ideally, when you are combining passes, I would use Illustrator as my output. So rather than taking Illustrator into Photoshop, I would rather take Photoshop into Illustrator. So let's look at that as well. So what I can do is go to File and I can go to Save, and I'm going to save this as a PSD file. So I'm going to call this Manual Render Pass PSD. And then I'm going to go to Place in Illustrator, and I'm going to place that Manual Render Pass PSD file. Alright, I'm going to just resize it. I'm holding Shift because I want to make sure that it is the exact size. All right. And I'm also going to put that on a layer. So I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to call it PSD Render Pass. And I'm going to move it to that layer. So that way I can put it behind. So what we have here is kind of the best of both worlds. So for example, we can now as you may have noticed, because we have a vector pass now in Illustrator, there is no need to rely on the line work coming from Photoshop, because we can see that the line work from Photoshop is actually quite, well, not so good. If I turn off the Photoshop render pass, you'll see that that line work is definitely not needed. In addition to that, the resolution of that Photoshop file is a bit low. That's why we're getting this this jagged line work here. So one solution we could do to that is, let's go back into Photoshop. And well, what we're going to do is we don't need to use the hidden line render pass anymore, because we got better line work coming from the vector pass. So what we can do is we're going to go back into SketchUp. Now that we have the vector pass, we can get some more interesting manual pixel passes from SketchUp. So if we head back over to SketchUp, what we can do is, let's try and mix things up with a section and combine that with the vector pass. Now in SketchUp, we save the camera view like this. Now currently we can see that this camera view that we have here is locked, which is a good thing. So if we end up moving our view, so if we, for example, took another view like that, we can click back this I button here, and it says, we can select the camera that we want to go to, and it goes back to that view. So that way we can always have our view the exact way as how we would like it, so that we can continue our compositing with the render passes. Now one thing to note is that the views are very similar, are the same thing as scenes. So let me open up my tray here, and let's minimize everything, and let's expand scenes. And what you should notice is that these views here is the same as the scene that we have here. Now scenes basically saves everything that you see in your viewport, and when you choose back this scene, it will set back all settings, all render styles to exactly how it was when you first captured the scene. So currently we want to create a new scene that is a section, and one that also has a different look and feel. Now to do that, what we're going to do is first set up let us set up our section view. And what I can do is just kind of orbit my view away, and then I'm going to hit the section tool, which is located here, and let us cut a section like this. There we go. I'm going to choose OK. Let's move this section into place. So we're going to use the move tool and probably put the section like that. That's good enough. Now interestingly, when we go back to this view or this scene by double clicking, what you will notice is that the section is now gone. The section cut is still there. You can kind of see it, because you can kind of see this line that's going across here. But what's happened is that this view that we have here is pretty much capturing all the visual settings that we had set, including section cuts, in SketchUp. So that means that when we had captured this camera view, we did not have a section cut, which is why the section cut is disabled. Now, what we're going to do is set up everything that we want to have with this exact view, and then we're going to save that as a new camera or a new scene. They're the same thing. Alright, so let's head over to styles, and we're going to change our style. So we're going to customize it. So we're going to go to edit, and then let's go to edges, and we're going to say we don't want to see the profiles and we don't want to see the edges. That's fine. Let's head over to materials, and if we expand our materials settings with that little icon there, you will see that we have the ability to show all the materials that are currently in the model. Right, so let's expand that down. So what we're seeing here are all the materials that are currently in the model. Now what we can do is we can actually use our pipette tool, which is that tool right there, and we can take a sample, let's say, of this material here, and it's showing me that that material there is equal to this material. And what we can do is go to edit, and let's just change the color slightly. Let's make it a little lighter. There we go. Let's take a little color out of it. Yeah. Alright. Okay, let's go back to styles and continue to customize these styles. So we just want to show shaded mode. Alright, we do want to show transparency, and over in modeling settings, let's see, we want to show the section fills. Also, we can kind of see that section cut in the background here. So if we click on it, let's make this section active. So we can see that the color here corresponds with that color there, and also the section line cut corresponds with the lines whenever we deselect the section. So for example, if I click over here, you will see that that is the color of the section lines, and this is the color of the fills there. So what we want to do is we want to let's take the thickness down to 1. Then let us change the section fills to maybe, let's say, an orange color. And we can let the section cut line stay as red for now. That's fine. And all of these settings that we have just changed, the section cuts and the view and activating the section line, we're going to save all of that as another scene or another camera, right? So this up here is the same thing as the scenes down here. Now we don't want to click this scene here, or else everything is just going to go back as how it was. So we're going to just click the new scene, and we're going to say save as new style and create that scene. There we go. And now this scene is scene 2, and you can kind of see the preview that this looks like scene 2. And if we should click back scene 1, double click it, then that is scene 1, exactly as how it was before. right? Now notice that the material color is not part of the scenes, so that remains consistent. So let's choose back scene 2 by double clicking. And that is scene 2, so it saves the scene exactly as how it was. Now what we want to do is go to File, and then we want to go to Export, and we're going to export that 3D model. Not the 3D model. We're going to export the 2D graphic, and we're going to save it in the same folder, in our manual passes folder, and we're going to save this as, we're going to save it as a PNG, right? And we want to save this as section shaded. Let's go in options and make sure that we have this on transparent, and then we're also going to uncheck this icon here and set our image size to like about 4000, something that's pretty big. Now we're going to save this file, and we're going to save that as a PSD file because we want to keep all of the Photoshop editing capabilities, and we're going to name it as shaded with shadows. That's fine. And then we're going to head over to Illustrator, and we're going to go to Place, and we're going to place that PSD that says shaded with shadows. Now we can just actually attach it to the top left corner, and we can just scale this, and it doesn't matter the proportion, because as long as we snap it to the image, it will line up 100% with the vector image, as you can see here. Now it might look a little weird because we do need to put this on a layer, so we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call that layer shaded with shadows, and we're going to right click and assign to that layer. We're going to put that layer behind our vector layer. Now right away you can see that this has exactly lined up, and we can start to see the difference with using line work that is coming as pixels versus line work that is coming as vector, right? However, depending on the size that you're going to produce at, that will determine if that is okay or not. So now we have two layers. We have the shaded with shadows layer that is really attached to a Photoshop file, and then we also have our original vector pass. Let's call that hidden line vector pass. So if we turn off the vector pass there, we can see just the shaded with shadow, and if we turn off the shaded with shadow, we can see the vector pass. Now, one of the reasons that we chose to link the Photoshop PSD file is that we may choose to go back to edit that Photoshop file. So by editing this file here, it will automatically update the Illustrator file, and the Illustrator will be our output. If we were going to print, we would have printed from Illustrator, and if we were going to publish to the web, we would publish from Illustrator. Now the reason we choose Illustrator to publish is because Illustrator is resolution independent, which means that it doesn't matter what you output this media to, these lines will always be 100% sharp. Whereas the lines coming in from Photoshop is based on a specific size, a specific number of pixels, which is why it is finite. So it's a good idea to, especially for architecture, whenever you get the chance, you publish your work from a vector-based program.